everybody, welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration, your indie spotlight for the week of February 19th, 2025. Pretty solid week. Not a huge week, but a good solid week. I mean, there were definitely enough books. It wasn't a situation where there were a ton of books that I wanted to read that I didn't get a chance to. But yeah, I thought it was a really, really good week. So, before we get Rocky's opinion on the week overall, I do want to remind everybody you can check out our thoughts on all the DC releases over on Rocky's channel. Comic Space Boom, ! On YouTube. Once you're there, like, comment, subscribe, ring that notification bell so you know when new content comes out. And obviously, all of the content that we put out, all our collaborations, as well as all past thousands and thousands of episodes of the Comic Source are available audio only on the Comic Source podcast feed. Just go to your favorite podcasting app or platform, do search for the Comic Source, and subscribe. And tons of content coming out this week. In addition to the DC Spotlight and the Indie Spotlight, interviews, had a chat with Evan Cagle, the artist on New Gods that just came out tomorrow, or Thursday, I should say. I don't know exactly when you're listening to this. There's going to be a chat dropping, an interview with Jeff Lemire and Nick Robles about Absolute Flash. Had a chance to talk with Matthew Rosenberg about his upcoming Image series. So a lot of content dropping this week, and you can find it on the Comic Source YouTube channel or the Comic Source audio. So, yeah, you got a chance to read some of the books this week. Rocky, what'd you think?
Oh, it's another great indie week. I mean, it's. I don't know if there's ever been a bad week. I guess a bad indie week is when there's not a lot being when there's not a lot published. But there's a great selection this week, and they're all pretty good. We've been reviewing enough. With this collaboration I have going with you with the indie, not just the DC, but with this indie podcast, I sort of I've gotten more into the routine of regularly reading indie comics, which I always did before, but I would often cheat and I'd read them sometimes in bundles but now I'm reading them more regularly and I'm enjoying it. It's a little bit more work, but it's pretty good. And this week, yeah, there's a couple of standouts for me this week. It was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I fall in the same trap sometimes, and it depends on the book. Walking Dead was notorious for this, where you'd want to read I would save up till I had like 5 or 6 issues of Walking Dead, because you read an individual issue, it felt like not that much happened, which is a little bit typical of Robert Kirkman style plotting and pacing. But it's kind of tough. Like I was reading World Tree, I loved it. Like first 3 issues. We're going to talk about the latest issue today. And then I just fell off it for a little while. And then when I caught up, I went back from the beginning and I read it all. I think there was 10 issues out at the time. I read all 10 issues. It was fantastic. And then now I'm reading each issue as it comes out. I'm wondering, man, have I become a person that wants to wait for the trade? I'll never wait for the trade on stuff in terms of, wanting to put out content and what have you. But it's like, I can understand more why some people wait for the trade. I've always been, not that I've looked down on it, but the thing is, if everybody waits for the trade, there is no trade because there's no series. Because you got to have enough sales on the single issues in order to keep it going. But I get it. I understand why some people do, because you get a much bigger chunk of story, and that just works better for some of these books that are out there. So anyway, let's go ahead and dive into the first book that we're going to talk about this week, Deadly Tales of the Gunlslinger, which has been fantastic right from the beginning. Written by Jimmy Palmiotti. We have art by Patrick Reynolds. Colors by Luis NCT. Letters by longtime Spawn letterer Tom Orzechowski. At the end of last issue, we saw Gunslinger Spawn sort of being attacked. He's sort of trapped, if you will, in a brothel. And all the various ladies employed by the brothel seem to be possessed in some way. There are a lot of questions about Gunslinger Spawn and how he's being manipulated and who's manipulating him and who are his enemies, and who did his enemies give him power? Did somebody else give him power? Like, what exactly is going on? It's a bit of a slow burn. It's slower paced, but I'm really enjoying it. So, it was a little bit of a cliffhanger ending. So you kind of wonder. We open with this full page splash here of Gunslinger Spawn, and it's a fantastic image, really impactful. With at the bottom we see a Native American village and it's in flames, and you wonder what that's about. And we see some Native Americans there. Apparently they died, because then we see them as just skeletons, and they're pointing to a sort of a butte in the distance, and then we see this circus that looks kind of run down. We see some holes in the top of the big top there, like, what's going on? And then we have this Native American woman. Apparently she's dreaming. She looks to be some sort of shaman or have some sort of mystical abilities. There's a wolf there next to her. Find out she's dreaming, and then she feels summoned in some way, and she's putting all these supplies together, and we're just not exactly sure what's going on. But she looks fierce, and I'm really interested to find out more about her. Is she being drawn to Gunslinger Spawn, like we wonder, right? But she awakens from this dream. She packs up those supplies. She immediately gets on her horse and rides off, even though it's the middle of the night. We see the sun, not the sun, but the moon there, and high in the sky, so we know it's the middle of the night. And then we see the mysterious figure that we've seen in the first couple of issues that seems to be manipulating Gunslinger Spawn, and we're not sure exactly what his role is. And he's watching her, ride off, and he's saying, "And where the offense is, let the great axe fall." And you're like, okay, what does that mean? Sounds kind of cryptic. But you notice it's kind of that same butte that we saw with the skeletons that looked like, maybe the skeletons are ancestors or what have you. So definitely some foreboding here with what's being set up. And then we get back to the story at hand with Gunslinger Spawn and the women that were attacking him and what have you. So what I love about the way that Palmiotti sets this up, and it's beautifully drawn by Patrick Reynolds, is scenes like this, right? I mean, this is a Western. This is a Western story, and I can't think of anybody in modern times that I've read, writers that I've read their work personally, that does a better job at the romance and the aesthetic and the feel and the vibe and the tone, whatever word you want to use. Nobody does it better than Jimmy Palmiotti. Nobody, at least in my experience, right? And I'm not saying that Patrick Reynolds isn't a huge contributor here, because he is visually, right? But he's getting that prompt from Jimmy. Jimmy's an artist himself. He knows what he wants things to look like and what have you. And to me, at the end of the day, that's what this book is about. This book is a Western, right? Like, take the Spawn stuff out. It's just a Western. So, we've had Todd on. I had a conversation, Todd McFarlane, had a conversation with Spawn editor-in-chief Thomas Healy about his upcoming book, and we talked about Spawn in general. That'll be coming out in a few weeks in anticipation of his book. But he mentioned it, Todd McFarlane mentioned it when he was on, this idea of the Spawn universe titles. You don't have to read everything, but they want to introduce a diversity of titles that give a variety. So if you're not into superheroes or supernatural or dark kind of stuff, maybe you're not reading the main Spawn. Maybe you love Law and Order, so you're going to read Sam and Twitch. Maybe you love westerns, so you're going to read this, Deadly Tales of the Gunslinger. But they're taking the time to create good comics that have the feel of whatever it is that it's supposed to be capturing. And in this case of Gunslinger Spawn, it is a Western, and that's what you're seeing. Whether it's beautiful vistas like this with great art from Patrick Reynolds, or if it's violent, bloody gun battles like we see here with the women, women of the night, prostitutes. I don't know, whatever term you want to use. And the people of the town, the townsfolk seeing this and sort of just taking it as matter of course. I mean, they're not like, oh, this is great. They're like, oh, this is not so good. But they just all sort of accept it. They just all sort of, it's so strange. Like their reactions, it's kind of humorous in a way. And Gunslinger Spawn is shooting them, and they're not all dying or what have you. Eventually, he captures the leader. He interrogates her. It's pretty brutal and violent, but again, you get that sense of frontier justice that you would have in a Western. And I love when he finally, he negotiates with her sort of in a way. And she's like, oh, I tell you what you want to know, and then you let me leave. He's like, no, you're going to die no matter what. But it's a matter of how you die. Do you die quickly, or do, you suffer, or what have you? And we can see when he gets the answers he wants, he sticks a load of dynamite in her mouth and lights the fuse and walks off, which is just, I mean, again, very violent, but very Western. And obviously she explodes, and then they bury the other women, which you hope that they're going to stay buried. But again, the sense you get, like even in this scene where they're burying everybody with the horizon and the sun going down, it's classic Western symbolism and scenes, and that's just the way the book works. It is a Western that just happens to have a character that's tangentially related to Spawn, but you don't need to know anything about Spawn to read this and enjoy it. Yes, there's still a lot of questions to be answered. Yes, there's still a lot of mysteries, but I'm happy to have Jimmy and Patrick take their time to get there because I'm enjoying the ride.
Yeah,
like a nice trot on a horse, with great stuff to look at. That's what this book is.
Well,
so I just love it. I just love it.
Yeah, Gunslinger Spawn gives a new meaning to that phrase "pale rider."
Yeah,
And it's the great thing about Jimmy Palmiotti and such a wise choice to be a writer of this series is that he knows all the Western tropes, and frankly, many of those Western tropes we want to see in this comic because they're just cool and they're timeless. Everything from the pale rider who happens to be Gunslinger Spawn into this town to battling an unknown enemy, while he's searching for the killer or the kidnapper of his sister, and of course. And to use the town folks' name, who are less diplomatic than you were, there's some angry whores in that brothel, is the phrase they used. And they think that they don't know what vampires are or the undead. They call them. They figure that the whores have rabies, and so they because in small town that's how they sort of try to explain it to themselves, and frankly they're on the side of Gunslinger Spawn because I mean they could clearly see he shoots and kills these women and they get up again and he shoots them again, shoots them in the head. They're still kind of alive and breathing, so there's something is really off with them. And of course he ends up being quite brutal, bringing a brutal end to one of the remaining surviving whores, I guess, ladies. And in any event, it's and then you sort of there's of course the other trope, Western trope, is the reporter who wants to report, the ones that followed Wyatt Earp around, writing about these gunfighters. Of course now we've got a reporter now who's going to be following Gunslinger Spawn and undoubtedly playing a role in spreading the legend of Gunslinger Spawn that will undoubtedly lead into present day, all these rumors about the Gunslinger Spawn. So all that stuff we've had in a lot of Western movies, Western tropes, but it's great to see it here in within the universe of Spawn, and it works really well, and the art really is fantastic. Kudos to the artist Patrick Reynolds. Really captured the ambiance and the mood just perfectly.
Yeah, I do wonder though. This reporter, you mentioned him, and Spawn kind of rebuffs him or what have you. But I don't know if you noticed, Rocky, but in the final panel, how it's colored, where his glasses are sort of tinted green and his eyes are reddish. They don't look reddish in any other.
So he might be from hell, or
yeah. I mean, those are traditionally Spawn colors, right? Red and then glowing green necroplasm or what have you. Right. So is he more than just a reporter?
Probably, we'll have to wait and see, I guess.
So yeah, we'll have to. Plus, I mean, just the look on his face. After Spawn rebuffed him, you would think he would look so happy. So yeah, the end for now, and I guess we'll see how it picks up in the next issue. But yeah, highly recommend picking that up, everybody, especially if you're a fan of the Western. Then yeah, it's going to be right up your alley. So, all right, next up, I'm going to chat a little bit about G.I. Joe from Skybound's imprint over at Image. Let me give the credits first. Written by Joshua Williamson. Art is by Tom Riley. Jordy Biller on colors. Russ Wooten on letters. Here's what's interesting about G.I. Joe, right? Like, I think about it in terms of... this comic came about as a commercial for a toy company, right? I mean, not this specific comic, but G.I. Joe as a property, right? Hasbro wanted to bring the G.I. Joe property back. It had existed in the 60s with, I think they were like 10 or 11 inch tall, action figures, quote, dolls for boys. Got to call them action figures, can't call them dolls. And so they decided, hey, we're going to bring them back. We're going to, make them much smaller because it's cheaper to make and what have you. And to coincide with that, we're going to do a cartoon. We want to do a comic also. So they contacted Marvel Comics, licensed it, and Larry Hama famously created some of the characters, and it grew from there. Cartoon, to come on in the afternoons, and obviously Yo Joe, and knowing it's half the battle, and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it was a commercial to get people to buy the toys, get kids to want to buy the toys. And what was interesting was Larry Hama really elevated it. He took it beyond that. And Marvel did a good job, ran for 135 issues at Marvel or what have you. And then it was still popular enough that even after the Marvel license expired, it went over to Devil's Due. It was at Image for a while, then IDW had it for a long time, and now it's over at Skybound. At no point in the first 3 issues of the G.I. Joe comic has it really felt like it's been a big enough of a story for me to feel like I care about the characters and I would go out and want to buy these toys. And I get it. It's not the same thing. I'm sort of comparing apples and oranges or what have you. But I think back to what Hama did in elevating the material and making it more than just, generic comic that was made to sell toys. Like think about the comics that used to come with toys, like with He-Man action figures and what have you. This was so much more than that. Kind of like the same thing with Rom Space Knight. Big flop as a toy, but the comic went on for 75 issues, 4 annuals. It's beloved by a lot of people of our generation because Bill Mantlo elevated it. And that's what Larry Hama did, and they sort of fed off each other. Hama introduced characters in the comic that then became toys. Obviously, toys that were created and characters that were created as toys ended up in the comic, and it went back and forth, sort of a symbiotic relationship. But when this started out, and I'm not talking about the Duke series or the Scarlet series or Cobra Commander or Destro, because I thought those were all really good. But the main series, the first 3 issues of the main series, left me a little bit feeling out in the cold. Like, not enough happening, not enough, to the point where I really care about these characters. They felt like really quick reads. I think part of it is Tom Riley's style of art. He uses really big panels, and so that's what lends itself to this really fast read. I mean, 4 panels a page, you're going to be done, quickly. You're talking about, 30 seconds a page here. I mean, all of these first 3 pages all have 4 panels a page. So it ends up being a really quick read, and that lends it to itself where it doesn't feel like a complicated story. It doesn't feel like there's a lot happening. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of momentum in the story. When are we going to get anywhere? And there have been a few events that have happened. One of the Joes was killed. Another Joe snuck off to infiltrate Cobra. So there's been some events that have happened where you feel like I should be more invested in the story, but I just haven't been. Well, that turns around with this issue 4, which is why I wanted to talk about it. I don't think we've talked about G.I. Joe since issue number 1, because the last couple issues have just felt sort of mediocre in a lot of ways. I'm still not the biggest fan of Tom Riley's art. He's great with his transitions from panel to panel, but I'm finding myself, this is happening more and more. I know Jordi Belair is one of the most talented color artists in the business, but more and more I'm seeing her use these muted color palettes because I think that's what the art sort of is asking for, because the art isn't, I don't want to say it's not up to like a professional standard or what have you, because it is, but it's just not the type of art that's really dynamic that you would want sort of traditional primary colors on. And I get that G.I. Joe, it's not really superhero, but it's as close as you can get to it, right? And you think back to those classic Marvel G.I. Joe books that I was talking about, and it did have, more primary colors, although a lot of those were grounded stories. You didn't have people with, superpowers, really. There's no Spider-Man wall crawling or what have you. So you take my point, but this is not that. Like, it partly what turns me off is this style of coloring that's become more and more prevalent that I just don't enjoy, right? Like, we see a sniper that works for the Crimson Twins here, and look at how it's colored. Like, it's very muddy. It doesn't jump off the page. To me, it's not inviting. The colors don't evoke action. They don't tell you, hey, there's something really dynamic going on this page, because they're so dull. And I'm not sure that it's the right choice. I'm not sure if Tom Riley's the right choice of artist for the book. Because if you look at the cover, that's not the case with the cover. The cover's very dynamic. You see I can't remember what it's called. I think maybe a raptor or something. But the Cobra Jeep all-terrain vehicle or whatever, and Cobra Commander standing on it with holding the Cobra.
I used to own one of those in the 80s.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I know the tanks are called his tanks. I can't remember. I didn't have that vehicle, so I don't remember what it's called. But anyway, you take my point. Like that's a dynamic cover that looks really cool with the lightning and the bright colors or whatever. And then you get in the book, and it's just so dull. It's just so dull. So constructive criticism. I did enjoy this issue. It felt like more happened. A lot of the Joes have been captured by Cobra. We'll see what happens. The other part, it's still a very small team at this point. So, because of that, it's not like it's a really complicated story. But I just can't help but to compare this back to, when I was reading the classic Larry Hama, and this was 80s comics when storytelling wasn't as sophisticated. But you compare that to this, and those stories are way more, complicated with a lot more going on than in these. I'm still waiting for something exciting to happen, and we're starting to get that. It's here. The beginnings of it are here in this issue, but this book still has a long way to go for me. I mean, it's sort of, and maybe this is how Kirkman wants it, right? Like, it's not so different from what I was saying earlier about Walking Dead, where, man, I would almost say, so far, 3 issues in, or this is issue 4 here. It's like, well, we got 2 more issues before the first arc's done. Maybe you got to wait for the trade in order to get a big chunk of story. I don't think that's fair to the people that are buying it monthly, that are making sure that we get to the trade. I think you want to be able to pick up a comic and read it and have it stand on its own and be enjoyable. And this is entertaining. Don't get me wrong, but the first 3 issues less so. And I just think it needs to be better. It just needs to be better. I am enjoying it, but I wouldn't tell anybody, hey, yeah, pick up. You should be picking up G.I. Joe on a month in, month out basis. What I'd say is, hey, pick up the first trade that collects the first arc and see if it's for you. Yeah, because we still got 2 issues to go. But it's funny. It feels plodding. If that, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like PLODDING. Like,
yeah, It's funny because I think that the color palette is very intentional, and it was just funny. I was listening to another review on this very issue on YouTube, and the individual loved the color palette and actually called it out and thought Jordie Bellaire was duplicating her color palette as she put on Birds of Prey, and
which I also didn't like.
Yeah, I know. So I think it's a mixed bag, and I think it was just like on Birds of Prey. I think it was a divided sort of fan base in terms of the color palette on Birds of Prey, you seem to either love it or really don't like it, depending on whatever faction or crowd you're in. I think it actually works a little better for G.I. Joe, only because it's a military sort of thing. It's a little bit more, it's darker, and they're trying to set maybe that type of tone. But I'm inclined to agree with you. I like more of the primary colors, because I really think that when you compared it to the cover there, it's very obvious that it just jumps off the page, that bright color palette. And Jordie Bellaire, she's very clearly, she's talented and she's trying new things, and all the power to her. And you make a good point that perhaps a different artist would inspire a different type of coloring. But I wonder how much of this is really Jordie Bellaire's colors, and she made this call herself, independent of whichever artist she was working with. So it'd be interesting to maybe ask that to her next time you interview her.
I'd love to interview her. I've never had the opportunity. I mean, when you choose a palette for a book, and it's not a specific issue that just, for whatever reason, this particular story we're telling in this series needs to have this specific palette. This is an overall look. And the other series that I mentioned, kind of the Prelude series, they weren't super brightly colored either, but brighter than this. But there's no way that Jordie made this decision unilaterally, especially with what I know of Robert Kirkman. This was a discussion between Kirkman and Joshua Williamson and Jordie Bellaire and Tom Riley. They all got together and for whatever reason decided this is the direction they wanted to go. I don't agree with it, but hey, it's selling really well. But I mean, if you're a G.I. Joe fan, you want to read G.I. Joe comics, this is all you got, pretty much. I mean, you do have excuse me, you do have the continuation of Larry Hama's classic run, which continued from the Marvel days over at IDW, and now is continuing with Larry Hama still at the helm at Skybound. But obviously, that doesn't tie into the Energon universe the way this does. So yeah, I might be in the minority. But yeah, I'm wishing for a different artist, a different color palette, maybe just a different color palette. I don't know. Again, it's not that I don't think Tom Riley can draw. He clearly can. But and maybe this isn't, again, like I said, maybe it's intentional. Maybe he's using 4 panels because he can use 4 panels because the scripts just don't have much to them. I'm not privy to that. So anyway, just my 2 cents on it. Let's move on to next book that we're going to talk about. Let me get it up in front of you. So here's another one that I think didn't quite live up to its potential. It's Hour of the Wolf from Mad Cave Studios. It was certainly enjoyable. Don't get me wrong. And we know that there is a crossover coming later this summer that's going to tie into Hour of the Wolf and Exit City and what's the third one? Revolution 9. So I'm really looking forward to that. But this was written by Mark London, great art by Danilo Bayrith, colors by Fabi Marquez, and letters by Dave Sharp. And at the end of the day, this is a satisfying conclusion. It does finish the story of this mysterious painting and the character that inhabits the painting that sort of steals people's souls and dreams and wishes and what have you. We see him on the front cover. He's a terrifying individual, and we meet this character that is part of this what is it called, like Wolfengard or whatever it is, where he's a person that literally exists during the hour of the wolf, 3 to 4, from 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. Every night is when he gets to exist, and he travels through time, different hours, always that same hour, but on different days and different years and what have you. And he ends up tricking this guy, and he rescues everybody, and he saves the day. But it felt, I don't want to say convenient, but I mean, this was 4 issues, and it wasn't momentous. It wasn't surprising. It just felt a little incomplete. It felt like the beginning. You know what I mean? Like it felt like all 4 issues could have been structured a little bit differently, and it could have all been presented as a one shot, like maybe a 40-page or 48-page one shot, to introduce us to this character, to introduce us to the organization that he works with, why he works with them, and we could have gone from there. Instead, it felt a little decompressed. Obviously we understand that he works with Wolvenheart, and we understand you'll get some information revealed in this issue that he used to be a criminal and has roots in London, and was around the time of Jack Ripper and what have you. So it wasn't like we got nothing out of this issue, but again, it felt a little decompressed for no reason. Plus, it started a bunch of threads and asked a bunch of questions that didn't get answered. Right, which you would sort of expect. Mad Cave, the way they do it, they'll come out with a 4-issue mini, and then a couple of years later they'll do a follow-up and what have you. I mentioned we have that crossover coming later this summer, so that's going to flesh out some of this stuff. But I mean, we even have an epilogue that introduces more concepts. So at the end of the day, this just felt a little bit incomplete. Although we did have a satisfying conclusion to kind of the main story. The larger story of Wolvenheart and all that, it wasn't fleshed out. It wasn't explained, and yeah. I think a little bit of a missed opportunity, because just based on the strength of this, I'm not saying that anybody who reads this is not going to come back for more, but I could see somebody going, wow, that didn't really land with the kind of impact as a series that I would have wanted it to. So yeah, I don't think I'm going to come back for more. As opposed to like Exit City, for example, which I think has been a stronger project from writer Mark London, where I think you read that and you do want to know more. You do like, okay, I want more of these characters. I want more of Exit City. I got to be sure to show up for the crossover so that I can learn more. I mean, don't get me wrong, this character, Owen Blackwood, is interesting. And the idea of him only existing between the hours of 3 and 4 in the morning, the hour of the wolf, what is House Wolvenheart that he works for, almost like the supernatural police force, those are intriguing questions. and there are, again, hints and questions that the series raises that we don't get answers to. But is this series strong enough that people are going to show back up just based on this and show up for the event? I'm not sure that that's the case. Luckily, I think Exit City, it is the case. Revolution 9, it is the case. But for me, although I enjoyed this, it is, in my mind, the weakest of the three series of the Underworld universe at Mad Cave. So I guess, something had to be the weakest. Again, I thought the art was fantastic, great concept. It just feels like it didn't fulfill its potential. You know what I mean? So
I would share your sentiment. I did read this one too. It's the last one I read, and it was okay, but it was just okay. It was just didn't really blow my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wanted more of Owen Black. There's enough intrigue there. Okay, so he used to be a criminal. Like if you would have given me more of him as opposed to focusing the story on jumping around and being trapped in the painting, it would be a little more invested. You know what I mean? Because he seems like an interesting guy, but I don't know enough about him that I'm going to show up for a series that he's in. But I mean, great art, great visuals. I mean, that the character they came up with, I don't know that they ever give him a name, villain, but yeah, he's fantastic. Especially that the first time he shows up, where he doesn't have any eyes or mouth, and he uses a straight razor to cut himself eyes and a mouth. It's so creepy, so creepy. That visual will stick with me for a long time. So, all right. Anyway, up next, here's a book from Boom Studios that Rocky has been reading. I have not, but perfectly fine. I don't need to read everything Rocky reads. But it's by writer Michael W. Conrad, art by John J. Pearson. I'm a huge fan of John J. Pearson, with art assist by Lola Bonato, and it's lettered by Pat Broso. So I know you've been reviewing all these. Rocky's up to issue 3, so give us your thoughts on this one.
Well, this is written by Michael W. Conrad, and as I said before, and I'll maintain it, it's the best work of Michael W. Conrad that I've read yet. Haven't really been impressed with much of what he's written, but most of that was with DC and his collaboration with Becky Cloonan on Wonder Woman. Well, that was was hilarious, and that's another topic. But in Bloom, I like it. This idea that basically all humanity is basically we're really basically glorified plants, and this takes place in a universe where, as human beings, as you grow older, it's very likely that you're going to bloom. And in this particular world, when you bloom, you just as there are millions of different types of plants, there's different types of variations when you bloom, and it's something to look forward to. And this is something that all humanity sort of embraces, but there's certain people who can't bloom. And in this particular issue, we were introduced to the Lotus Society last issue, which is basically they're considered a terrorist group because they're the ones that are the ones that bloom, and there's this detective who is dying from cancer, and he's a former Marine, and he can't bloom because he's actually dying from cancer. And when you're rejected, if you're a human being who cannot bloom, then you ultimately end up becoming fertilizer for the rest of humanity, and it's just as cruel and as awful as it sounds. At the end of the first issue, you see what happens. You're literally, if you're old and decrepit, or if you're a senior, or if you're sick in any way, if you're almost a defective human who can't bloom, you're sort of like ground up and you become glorified fertilizer. And there seems to be sort of like this, Michael W. Conrad does a good job of showing a world that seems to have embraced this, and there seems to be people that will. The lead character here, he's a detective, and he's a very good detective, and he's investigating a series of murders, and his partner is someone who's already bloomed. She's an LGBTQ character, and she's got she's actually she's short haired, and she's got a beautiful flower on the side of her head because she's partially bloomed already, but she's on his side. And in this issue, he meets a doctor, and the doctor is sort of encouraging him, giving him pamphlets about, going to an upcycler facility where he can be recycled, and because he can't bloom. And if you can't bloom, what is the purpose in life? Do your civic duty. If you're a human being who cannot bloom, you have a responsibility and a civic duty to humanity to basically let yourself get recycled, to basically for the betterment of humanity. And in this issue, in his pursuit of the case that he's working on, he infiltrates the Lotus Society, but they knock him out and they tie him up, and they want to investigate him. And ultimately, at the end of this issue, his partner, she follows him and manages to rescue him. And in so doing, well, that's how it ends. It sort of ends on that cliffhanger. But at the same time, while he's being sort of tortured, the doctor who's torturing him is messing with him somehow. And so you got to wonder if the cancer that he has and the experiments and the torture that the doctor's doing on him, is it going to somehow affect his ability to bloom, or to give him the ability to bloom, or somehow interact with the cancer in his body? What's the impact of that going to be? It's hard to say, but because it's a little bit psychedelic. I'm not sure where Michael W. Conrad is going to go with this, but I like it, and I have to say, I really like the visuals here. This is one of those comics where John J. Pearson, the artist, with art assist by Lola Bonato, they do a really good job here of sort of being creative, because you can imagine, of all the different types of crazy looking plants out there in the world, imagine what would happen if you could just creatively, artistically, how you could render a plant merging with a human. And there's some horrific things from the beautiful to the horrific. You can have a beautiful little flower rose develop on the side of your head and actually make you look more attractive. On the other hand, your whole face could split in half and you become like an alien looking spore creature. So from the mundane to the ugly to the beautiful to the horrific, artistically, Pearson does a good job of sort of covering all those parameters in this very unique kind of universe that Michael W. Conrad has scripted. So I've been enjoying this. I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, John Pearson, he's awesome. I got to meet him. I've been a big fan of his work for a long time. I got to meet him at New York Comic Con this last year. Super nice guy, so talented. And yeah, it's interesting, to see him go from Green and Blue that he did with Rom V, kind of a biography, to the sort of sci-fi stuff that he did with Zach Kaplan, now to doing this body horror stuff. No matter what it is, he makes it look cool and it suits the tone of the story. He's so talented, sure. So anyway, up next we have Minor Threats Brood, issue number 3. This is from writer Heath Corson. It also has Jordan Bloom and Patton Oswalt listed as writers. I mean, they're the creators of the Minor Threats universe, so they've had input on this. But Heath Corson's really the one doing the heavy lifting. Ian Colbert on art, which is really, really fantastic. And then Nate Picos handles the lettering. This has been a really enjoyable series from the start, and issue 3 is no exception to that. So let me go ahead and share the interior of the book and give us your thoughts on it, Rocky.
Well, each issue we've gotten different perspectives of the various members of the Archimedes family, and in this case, last issue we got the perspective of the daughter, who is a super villain essentially, and in this one we have the perspective of the son, who happens to be a very good cop, and he went to the side of law and order, and it's what Patton Oswalt and Jordan Bloom have done so well here is that they've sort of scripted a story of how crazy the life is for this sort of like really good cop, who it's almost like he's got a secret identity. Like he's always fighting crime, and yet half the time he's actually fighting his own family who are pulling off a lot of these heists, and it's really kind of awkward. And he even works with the local superhero, and she has no idea that Archimedes is this guy's is his father, and it works really well. And it's funny. It's the just like this is the theme of family and how even a dysfunctional family can function in dysfunction. And there's a wonderful play here where Archimedes basically he wants to attend his granddaughter's birthday party, and but of course his son doesn't want anything to do with him because he's a villain and his son's a cop, and so he literally orchestrates like a kidnapping, or orchestrates like a hostage situation, and so which will pull his son out, and he's literally, though Archimedes is negotiating with the top cop, and of course the world doesn't know that he's basically asking his son in their own side of sort of code, he just wants to have 40 minutes, come in and I'll start killing these people, but come in, I want 40 minutes of your time. And of course, it's really just code word for him wanting 40 minutes to spend time with his son at his granddaughter's birthday party. And that's what happens, and that's what ends up playing out. But it's the relationship that he has with his wife, his own children, and his father and his sister, like how all of that plays out just works out. It's very interesting, and it's entertaining as hell. What I like about what Patton Oswalt and Jordan Bloom are doing here is that this actually feels like a more adult, more real take on the stuff that we never really get it in the pages of the traditional American superhero comic. And by that, I mean the Superman and the Batman comics. This is just far more real. It feels more hardcore. It feels more visceral, more real. It feels like there's more emotional gravitas with this. There's more emotions are at stake. This feels more grounded and real to me. And that's what I really like about it. And I even feel like I know these characters, and how can I really know them out? Well, we're only 3 issues in, and yet I feel like I feel for these characters. And despite the fact that they're not, this particular person, he's a good person, but Archimedes is a supervillain. He's a murderer, and he's dying of cancer. And before he dies, he wants to have some sort of connection with his family, as dysfunctional as it might be. And it's another to see this world through the eyes of the different family members is what makes this such a powerful narrative. Just 3 issues in, I'm not sure if this is going to just be 4 issues long, or I'm hoping it's 6 because it's really good, or even if this was a series, but that's probably a wish fulfillment on my part. But I really enjoyed this, and the art, I think, does a really good job of conveying the story as well. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more to come in the world of Minor Threats. We're getting some anthologies and what have you. So yeah, this is planned for only 4 issues, but we could see more of these characters in the future. And I want to be clear, Patton Oswalt and Jordan Bloom, they definitely contributed to the story, but the majority of the story, it's Heath Corson. So we want to make sure we credit him as the writer. He's the one that's coming up with all this stuff. I encourage everybody to go and listen to my interview with Heath. He's an amazing guy. He's got such great stories. He's lived a very colorful life. And he's got just fantastic stories. A lot of the family dysfunction here, he's pulling from his own family, him being a creative and his father being a businessman. There was very much a disconnect there. He's got, again, great stories about that. So he's definitely pulling from his own experience. So go listen to my interview. Listen to all my interviews. He's been on the show several times, 3 or 4 times. They're all great. All the interviews are great. But, if you want to learn more about Minor Threats Brood specifically, and where he's pulling from and what have you, go listen to my latest interview with him, and Jordan Bloom is on as well. And Jordan gives all the credit to Heath for this amazing story. You're right about, functioning in the dysfunction, which is amazing. But it's so interesting, right? That saying, nobody picks on my little brother but me. When the chips are down and the Archimedes family is attacked at this birthday party by other supervillains, they do all come together and function as a team to protect the family, which is great to see. You know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, I guess. And the other thing, and Heath called this out specifically on the interview, is he got to create like the minor threats version of the Legion of Doom, if you will, the Fortress of Fear. So,
Yeah.
you know, speculator alert. You know, if you're into the, you know, first appearance, who knows? As I said, there's a lot more to come. I think Gail Simone's doing some work in minor threats, and there's been a ton of people. I want to say Jonathan Hickman as well. I can't remember. They announced a bunch of people that are working on upcoming minor threats projects at New York Comic Con last year. I'm sure you can look it up, Google it, or what have you. So a lot of these characters you're going to see show up in other books, but this is going to be their first appearance on this page here by Ian Colbert. We don't know a lot about him. The Queen, Grendel, Madame Osprey, the Scarlet Ifrit. I mean, they look cool. They look interesting. Hopefully Heath gets to flesh out some of the characters as well. But yeah, the Archimedes family and Napoleon Archimedes himself, just fantastic. You know, the idea of it being like a Wes Anderson film, you know, Royal Tenenbaums as a sort of an analog with Napoleon Archimedes sort of being that Gene Hackman royal type character. It's a good comparison, because this does have the quirkiness and sort of the functioning within dysfunction of family, like that film does, and those characters. So yeah, I love this series. I haven't heard enough people talking about it. Thing about all the minor threats books, they're all really good, really high quality, and every time I hear somebody talk about them, they're praising them, but I just don't hear enough people talking about them, I think. So we definitely want to shine a little spotlight on the world that Patton Oswalt and Jordan Blum have created, and you know, are inviting these other really talented creators to come and play in their sandbox, like Heath Corson. So definitely check it out, everybody. All right, up next, oh boy, the Power Fantasy is back. Written by Kieran Gillen. We have art by Casper Wingard, which I really want to talk a lot about the art in this one. It's starting the second arc, The Kids in America, which is a pretty interesting story. And we do have a little bit of a recap here in terms of who the different characters are, or atomics as they're called. This is a world where instead of nuclear weapons as a deterrent, there are a very, very small amount of extremely powerful super beings, and they're what sort of keeps the tenuous peace, if you will, Cold War type peace, because if one were to use their abilities to the full extent, it would kind of destroy the world and kill a bunch of people, whatever. And we know different events have happened. Kieran Gillen created a timeline we've seen before, like Europe in this world, on this Earth, doesn't exist. Like, it was devastated by one of these atomics using their powers, and millions, if not billions, of people died. So it's a different type of world. The world's a little bit more cynical or morose in a way. Like, you can think of it a little bit like the end of Watchmen. You know, when the aliens invade and what have you. You know, that sort of level of fear. So, you know, what can you do? What can't you do? But you don't want to set one of these atomics off. And they have sort of a tenuous peace and what have you. So, Kieran Gillen, I highly encourage you, if you do pick up this book, you pick up the trade of the first one or what have you, he gives fascinating insights into the creation of the story and all of that. And, you know, how he first conceived it, and the idea that, you know, if there really was a Superman, and he was really fighting against a doomsday, and they really had the power levels that they were supposed to have, if they actually fought, you know, it would just devastate entire cities, devastate the planet, cause earthquakes. Like, you know, it really would be a bad thing if we really extrapolate this out to you know, have it be realistic. And that's sort of the premise that he starts from. So it seems like a simple premise, and a very, very superhero-ish, right? Very much this is going to be like a superhero story, and with all the tropes that you know, come with that, and eventually they'll have a big battle and the Earth is destroyed, and, you know, very few survivors or what have you. But Kieran Gillen's a lot more clever than that, right? This is about the dynamics. It's a political book in terms of I'm not talking like, oh, you know, conservative or liberal or right, left, any of that. No, I'm talking about politics in terms of interpersonal relationships. And who do you have on your side, and who's backing you up, and who's betraying you, and who's sneaking around behind your back, and who's keeping secrets, and all that sort of stuff, like all the character dynamics, the drama of, any kind of classic soap opera, whether we're talking about General Hospital or Falcon Crest or Dynasty or any of those, Melrose Place, 90210, any of that kind of stuff, right? Where people have secrets and their own motivations and they're doing things behind other people's backs and all that. But these are people that have the ability and the power, the potential to destroy the earth and to wipe out millions, if not billions of people. So those are not people that you want to piss off. And they're people that you want to get along with each other and to get along with governments and humanity or what have you, to kind of ensure the survival of the human race. So this book is it transcends anything else that's out there right now. This very well may be the best comic on stands, because of the stakes, because of the great character work, because of the complicated characters that they are, the flawed characters. I mean, just because they have superpowers doesn't mean they're omniscient. Doesn't mean that they aren't. They don't fall prey to bad moods or snap decisions or letting their emotions get the better of them. It doesn't mean any of that. In that way, they're sort of inherently human. They're almost more human than you or I, but with all the foibles and imperfectness that comes with being, a human. Even though they're very long lived and possibly immortal, we just don't know. But it's so interesting and so complicated, and the character dynamics just pull you in. And it's just so sophisticated and so mature and so realistic in so many ways. And when you juxtapose that against this almost whimsical, lighthearted, lightly colored artwork of Caspar Wijngaard, you have something really, really... I mean, look at this art here. This isn't art that says, oh my God, these are dangerous people. Oh my God, the world's on the brink of destruction. Oh my God, look at how dark the colors are. Or, oh, look at how bright the colors are, which evokes ideas of really powerful beings and big explosions and all that. No, it's almost this pastel. Let's take a walk in the meadow. Everybody is sort of, beautiful and they're realistic. They're not, superhero out of proportion, power fantasies in terms of looking like Wonder Woman with giant muscles or super sexy or whatever. No, they look very realistic, but everything is colored very lightly. It's got Caspar Wijngaard's usual fine line work to provide detail and what have you, and that is so contrasting to the seriousness of the story and the complicated nature of these characters. I mean, every time I read, I was so excited when I was like, oh, Power Fantasy's back. I think the last issue we got was like November, and then they went on a little bit of a break. And it came back, and it just hit the ground running. It reminded me why I love it so much. It's just so good. I enjoy everything about it, including the essays in the back from Kieran Gillen, although this one has much less of an essay because he said they got a ton of letters. He's been wanting to do a letters page. So he didn't print people's whole letters, but he kind of just took the questions that they were asking and kind of condensed it down and then answered those questions. So you get a lot of information in the back in this one as well. But I'm not going to get too much into plot details. Rocky can if he wants, but this gets my highest possible recommendation. I'm really finding it hard at this point to think this is not going to be like my best series. This is just something so special. And you mentioned it before, Rocky, when we first started talking about this, first or second issue. You mentioned Kieran Gillen's series he did over at Avatar, Uber, which was one of those historical fiction, like what if the Nazis had won World War II? The Nazis had superheroes. They were able to develop soldiers with superpowers and what have you. I feel like that in a lot of ways laid the groundwork for this. There's some similarities in terms of themes of abuse of power and what have you. Reading this makes me want to go back and reread Uber because I haven't read it in a long time. So I might have to try to find some time for that. But anyway, I know you've been reading this. I know you've been enjoying it as well. Give us your thoughts on this, the series overall, or this issue in particular. Well,
this issue in particular, I mean, this is we get another perspective from one of these. Well, we get there's six atomics. These six individuals are mega powerful, and one of the many themes that were there that is addressed in this, aside from obviously how they interact with the world. They're ultra powerful, and they seem to be immortal, and they the world countries will continuously try. They're always under threat, and they have to sort of but they're like the gods of the world, and but they can't have children. And in this particular issue, one of the characters, one of the atomics, under basically one of the atomics, this brother Ray in the 60s created a cult, and under the cloud of the cult that he created, the reason why he did that was that he actually had children, he had offspring, and he's got two kids, and none of the other atomics know about it because they're not supposed to be able to have children. They're supposed to be one-offs. The origins of the atomics are somewhat mysterious. The only one who arguably maybe knows what the origins of the atomics are is the one called Lux, Etienne, and he's not saying much. He's perhaps arguably, he seems to be almost the one that seems to be, I don't know if he is the most powerful, but he seems fairly powerful. There's another one, Jackie Magus, who has now allied himself with the United States government, and the United States government hates the atomics because they want to be like the superpower, and the atomics are a threat to them, but because they're far more powerful than the U.S. is allying itself with Magus. Magus seems to have an ulterior motive. He wants to get Eliza, another one of the atomics, on his side and essentially try to take out Etienne. And so not only do we have these six atomics sort of dealing with all types of themes, which is just too much to go into in this one review. This is issue 6. There are many other themes in the first 5 issues, but here it's a lot of it's sort of coming to a head here, or it continues to build all these themes, and they're going to come crashing together at some point, because this isn't just about how the world reacts to the atomics. It's about these atomics reacting to each other, their own machinations, their own personal lives, I guess you could say, just like every country has its own unique problems, unique into a country. Obviously, these individuals who are more powerful in countries have their own unique problems as well, and including one Masuni, who is a very insecure artist, who, really, she's ultra powerful, and yet her power is wrapped in this insecure form where she's an artist. She's not a very good artist, but she's basically being humored by a girlfriend, a very dysfunctional relationship with her girlfriend, who basically continues to humor her because Masumi is so powerful that if you put her in a bad mood or she gets moody, I mean, she could end up, destroying something. And that's just one aspect of this, and of these 6 very complex, well-developed characters, and we're only 6 issues in. And you mentioned the backup where Kieran Gillen talks about how long he wants this series to be. He talked about how he'd like to hit 40, 50 issues, at least as long as his Wicked and Divine series. So he hopes to be able to have this continue on, and I hope so too, because this is really, really good. I will very much encourage people to try to get this from issue 1. Absolutely, when the inevitable trade comes out, collecting the first 6 issues, absolutely get that. I suspect if people just hop on this train at issue 6, might be a little bit lost, but I mean, still, even it's still kind of accessible if you're in for a little bit of a challenging read. But if you can absolutely get from issue 1 onward, you might have to wait for the trade. I believe they're probably all sold out, but God forbid if your comic shop actually has
multiple printings of issue 1 and 2, but I don't think the final printings of them have sold out. So you should be able to.
Well, good.
Yeah, you should.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, you should be able to find it, or they should be able to order it for you. As far as the trade goes, I don't know if a date has. So, yeah, actually, it says it came out January 29th, but I don't remember it coming out.
And that included issue 6?
No, only 1 through 5. The arcs are 5 issues. Yeah. So this issue 6 starts a new. This is the first issue of a new arc. So yeah, you should be able to get. I mean, it says I'm on the Image website. It says you can buy it directly from. Actually, you click the buy button, and it gives you a comic store locator. So yeah. So Power Fantasy Trade Paperback Volume 1. It says it came out January 29th, but again, I don't like when I go and look at League of Comic Geeks, it doesn't have it listed there. So I don't. Maybe it got delayed. I'm not sure, but it's either out or going to be out soon. If it hasn't come out. Oh, actually, here we go. I just found it. So it looks like, February 11th. It got delayed to February. But yeah, it should be out. The trade that collects the first 5 issues should be out, so you can get it in trade, or you can track down the single issues. But either way, I echo Rocky's sentiments. It is a book that you should try to read from the beginning. I did want to ask you though. His kid, so Heavy's kid, Brother Ray's kid, Kid Ignition, is his name, and Kieran Gillen mentioned him in his newsletter that came out this week. But what makes you think he has 2 kids? I think he just has 1. Why did you think he has 2?
Oh, okay. I got that at I have to access the comic again. I may have misread that. For some reason, I thought I got the impression that there was 2.
Because Brother Ray, he brought this woman in. She's like a reporter. She's going to be embedded with his cult for any number of days, and then she's going to be able to go out. She can't communicate to the outside world. She's not supposed to communicate with the outside world while she's there, but then after, she's going to go and tell his story, and he's going to reveal that he has a kid. So Brother Ray brings her inside, and they talk about how nobody in the cult's supposed to have any privacy, and he opens the door to his kid's room, Brother Ignition, and he's there with a girl. Maybe that's why you. Oh,
that's where I got confused.
But yeah, it's not. This is not as they were getting it on. They were like, he's a teenage boy raging in hormones, because he goes, oh, sorry, because you see in the silhouette in this circle panel right here, he's pulling up his pants, and then he goes, oh, we weren't expecting visitors, and Brother Ray says, just use an effing condom. So yeah, definitely not. I mean, that would be awful if he was doing it with his sister. But so he just has the 1. But obviously, this is a kid that's grown up, obviously very sheltered. I mean, we're going to learn a lot more about Kid Ignition, what his powers might be, like why was Heavy, that's Brother Ray's codename, why was he able to have offspring when others weren't, like Rocky intimated, and what kind of narcissism, what kind of personality quirks is this guy going to have, being that he was raised in a cult where his father is the leader of the cult. His father's one of the 6 most powerful beings on Earth. He's one of the 7 most powerful beings on Earth. He does whatever he wants, gets whatever he wants, whatever. Having sex with followers of the cult or whatever. And why does she have what looks like a tail? Again, a lot of questions to be answered. But I can't imagine this Kid Ignition is going to be very well adjusted. And I wonder if he's going to be one of these types of characters where I don't always like these characters. They don't always work well for me. But I wonder if it's where Kieran Gillen gets to say all the quiet things out loud. The kid's just going to be like a spoiled brat, says the most despicable, awful things, has no perspective on that one of those type of characters. It's a little cliche. I hope he goes a little beyond that. But we'll have to see. I mean, this Kid Ignition is definitely going to have a different perspective on life than most people do, for sure. So, but
I like the name too. It's a cool name.
Yeah, Kid Ignition, 100%. All right. Well, let me go ahead and move on to the next book. So this is one that I've been reading, and I mentioned earlier sort of the different Spawn titles and how they give you a different flavor and feel based on which one you're reading. So Rat City is up to issue number 11 here, from writer Erica Schultz. Jay Carlos is the artist. This is definitely the cyberpunk entry into the Spawn universe. Kind of similar to Tom Riley's art style in that it's a lot of big panels from Jay Carlos, but unlike G.I. Joe, it does have really bright colors that work really, really well. J. David Ramos does the colors. Erica Schultz handles the lettering. And so it doesn't, suffer from that like lack of action or feeling dull or what have you. If anything, this is kind of proving my point, what I was saying about G.I. Joe, because when you get the action here with these brighter colors, it pops off the page. It looks so good. And when you talk about this version of Spawn, this future version, which is it's this former soldier who has robotic legs because he lost his legs in combat action, and supposedly his connection to the Spawn abilities got short-circuited at the end of last issue. The other thing that's interesting is, he's a Hellspawn, but he's not dead like all the other spawns that we've seen in the past. So the corporation that gave him his legs was experimenting on him along with other soldiers who had lost limbs in battle. And so they see him as an asset, and they're trying to figure out where he got these abilities that he's been manifesting as this futuristic version of Spawn. I mean, they don't know who Spawn is. They're not, not aware of Spawn. He doesn't even know how he got the powers. He doesn't really understand it. So he doesn't actually transform into Spawn or show up as Spawn in this issue. But you still get the action because they have taken another employee of that corporation, a doctor who was trying to push back against the evil stuff they were doing, and they've mutated and modified him and turned him into this basically hunter, this like bounty hunter type character, and he's going after the Rat City Spawn. And so we see it here where he basically flies him up into the air and then just drops him. And we know he's not dead. He's the main character, although stranger things have happened. But we see, maybe he is finally dead. Maybe it's going to unlock even more abilities and make him more of a Spawn that we see, because his eyes fly open in that last panel. But the art is fantastic, and you can see what I'm talking about with brighter colors and how it just makes the art pop. But this is sort of the cyberpunk, science fiction, futuristic entry into the Spawn universe. Even though we're 11 issues in, it wouldn't be too hard to catch up at all. Because, again, like the G.I. Joe issues, and if there's one minor nitpick, because I really enjoy Rat City, but selfishly, I want the story to be a little further along, only because I'm so invested I want to know what's going to happen. And for being 11 issues in, we actually aren't that far along in the plot. Again, because each individual issue doesn't really move the story forward a tremendous amount, because we are getting larger panels that really show off the color work and the artwork, which is great. But again, this might be something, you pick it up in trade, you're buying it twice a year, as opposed to picking up the single issues. Again, I can't really wait that long. I want to know what's going to happen. But each individual issue, again, it's not a ton of story. And a perfect example here, this future version of Spawn, who fled the city last time, along with his Quinn, I think her name is, or their name, because they're non-binary. They flee, and they're kind of hiding on the outskirts of the city, and then this guy shows up and attacks them. That's literally all that happens. That's it. Like, it's not a lot of forward momentum in the plot. So again, I do wish it was a little bit further along. I'm trying to remember, is it Quinlan, I think, is the character's name. And Peter is the guy that's Spawn. So with the way this issue ends, with Peter perhaps being dead, I'm going to be curious to see, like, is it going to be revealed to him, like, how he got the abilities, or like what are going to be the consequences of him being mortally wounded? Because he is a Spawn, so he probably can't die. So, what does that mean? Does it mean he's going to get clarity on how he got the abilities, or what the abilities are? All that sort of stuff. So, remains to be seen. But, yeah, he's a fascinating character. Peter Cairn is his name, which I think is a really cool name for a Spawn character. So, again, if you're into sci-fi, want something a little different than the regular Spawn series, I do recommend picking up Rat City. And like I said, it's really easy to get caught up if you pick up, the trade, and then, the single issues, or wait till issue 12 comes out and pick up both trades. I think they'd probably be pretty quick reads, because again, big panels, big art, but not a ton of action in each particular issue. So, all right, real quick, talk about Star Trek here. We're up to issue 29, getting ready for the Lore War. This is written by Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly. Tess Fowler handles the art. I'm not a huge fan of the art style that Tess Fowler uses here, but it does work for what the story is. If you see it, it's all watercolor painted, which gives it sort of a unique look. So if you haven't been following Star Trek, here's what's been going on. Lore has basically the powers of a god almost. He's almost omniscient, omnipotent, and he's basically destroyed the universe, and he's going to remake it. The one person who has sort of survived is Benjamin Sisko, and he's on the Bajoran homeworld like back in the day, like in the past. But he knows what's coming in the future, and so he is manipulating, and he's sort of revered as a prophet and a leader because he is functionally immortal, in terms of the Bajorans, how they see him. He never ages. And thousands of years go by because he's far in the distant past, and he's manipulating events so that he's hoping in the future he will set it up so that the prophets of Bajor will be able to stop Lore. And so again, I'm not the hugest style of this art or hugest fan of this style of art, but because it does feel a little bit like a fable in a lot of ways, I think it does work. The other thing is, I get that they've been having to line up the other Star Trek titles to get Lore War to start, because obviously you have Star Trek Defiant and some other things that they're getting in order. And what you don't want during the event is delays. We always talk about how that robs that events of momentum. So I get that they wanted to build up a little bit of a cushion. And so it's like, well, what do you do in the meantime? So there's a little bit of a feeling of the latest couple issues of Star Trek feeling a little bit like fill-in issues, which isn't great either. But the reason I wanted to mention it is because the Lore War is coming, and I really enjoy overall what IDW has been doing with Star Trek, because this era, the Next Generation, and Deep Space Nine and Voyager era of Star Trek, like that's my favorite era of Star Trek. Those are the TV shows that I watched and the characters that I loved when I was growing up. And this feels like an extension of that. There's never been an era of Star Trek that's felt more like a continuation of those series. Like they've always felt like one and dones, and they don't really tie in or evolve the characters, and you can dip in or dip out. That's the way the old school DC Star Trek series always felt. They didn't matter to the overall Star Trek universe and continuing story. That's not the case here. Like these feel like the characters and it's partly because all the creators, they're of a generation that grew up watching Next Generation.
I might check out Lore Wars. It actually looks something that might interest me, because I imagine it's going to be accessible. The first issue, if it's like most big events, they always have the first few pages. Hopefully, just lore. If I just start reading Lore War, it'll be accessible.
Oh yeah, I 100%. It should be accessible. And if you're kind of curious, you can go listen to my interview from Jackson Lansing from New York Comic Con last year. So it dropped around late October, and Jackson catches everybody up on the whole Star Trek series. Really, he says, "Hey, here's what happens. Here's what you need to know," and that's everything you need to know going into Lore War. And then obviously, we get the IDW press releases, so we'll be covering Lore War when it comes out. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's the most fun I've had reading Star Trek comics ever. So I do recommend it, and I'm looking forward to. It's been, and I'm sure Jackson and Christopher Cantwell and Colin Kelly and the whole Star Trek team, they're probably really anxious for it to get started as well, because they've been working on it for a long time. So I'm sure they're like, yeah, let's get it out there in the hands of fans and see what they have to say about it. So I'm sure they're anticipating it being out and available as well. So, all right, up next, speaking of series that I got caught up on recently, World Tree number 13. This is from writer James Tynion. Art is by Fernando Blanco. Colors by Jordi Belair. She's all over our episode this week. And letters by Aditya Bidikar. So why don't you give us your thoughts? I mean, I know you're not. You kind of need to do a reread on the whole series because it's been a while. But give us your thoughts on this particular issue.
Well, it's interesting that you're letting me go first because I'll straight up say that I'm not entirely clear what's going on in this series at all. But my impression here, first of all, for this issue, I'm assuming I get the impression that this issue is the origin of one of the most compelling characters of this series. This woman who walks around naked all the time, looks absolutely gorgeous. The cover, I mean, she's bare-breasted, and I'm quite certain you could see it's very revealing, very provocative cover. Fernando Blanco's art is absolutely fantastic this issue. Jordi Belair, there's that name again, the colorist here, does just a really great job. You want to see how versatile she is. Compare this to G.I. Joe. I mean, it's very provocative, and this appears to be a largely silent issue. There's not a lot of dialogue, and that's a good thing because it's amazing how fantastic the visuals are conveying the story. This is very much an adult sort of origin for the lead character. I believe Sammy is her name, and just how she seems to have had sort of like an origin grounded in violence. And the idea of World Tree is that there's an undernet. There's a dark corner of the internet, the World Wide Web. It's called World Tree, and there's an undernet. And exactly what it is, this is where Sammy's like part of this. Her origin, there's this woman that seems to go around, seems to be an agent of the undernet. And again, I'm making some reference, some assumptions here, just really what's intimated to me from what I can gather, my recollection of reading the first 4 issues, and then reading this issue, and I've missed a whole slew in between. This is, I read this issue and wow, I'm just blown away. The art's fantastic. The some of the pages, and you're showing them now, Jace, is just, it's the pages of, it's almost like showing snapshots of the world, all of different parts in world history and what the world, as you can imagine, seen through the eyes of a dark underbelly of the internet. And meanwhile, we have this character, or these characters that are somehow exactly, I don't know what's going on or the motive here is, but this is one of those things where I am so desperately looking forward to going back and rereading this, because I have all the physical copies. I got them all from issue 1 all the way up to well, I guess issue 12. This is issue 13, and I've yet to find time to really read them. I read this issue and I'm absolutely blown away. And now that I know what I believe the origins are of the Sammy character, the main character, it's like, wow, okay, now I'm even more intrigued. What caused that to happen to her? Where did she go when she was under? She seemed to have died, and she was brought back. Her heart stopped, and instead of having like a near-death experience, she seemed to go to this other place, which I'm assuming is this undernet, or this otherworldly related Ethernet internet place, where there's other creatures that look tattooed and as provocative as her, and all naked as well. It's really psychedelic. James Tynion IV, man, that guy, he's got such a crazy mind. He's written so many different types of genre type of comic books, and this is one of them. But I know I often give plot synopsis and what have you, but to be honest with you, this is something, it captures my eye. I'm very intrigued by this character. I want to know more, and I'm going to go back and read more. But I'm so glad I bought this series. And I bought this series because it was James Tynion IV, and I'm behind on a number of his series. But I have faith in James Tynion. He's one of the ones where he's a name, I buy it, and the physical copy. And I'm going to be looking forward to this. I'm going to probably take a Sunday, hopefully maybe sometime in the next few weeks, and maybe read this. I know you told me you'd recently caught up and read it, and you were blown away. I know from listening to other reviews as well, a lot of them, they say you're going to get lost if you're going to, because a lot of them, they did the same as you. It's better to read it all in one sitting because you forget so much from month to month. It's one of those series that it's probably better to read in blocks. But I got to say, This is such a thank Fernando Blanco's art. He draws such sexually provocative characters, and really a gorgeous character, and the visuals sort of enhance the eroticism of it, and the electro psychedelic nature of it, and the dream sequence of it. While she's lost in this other realm. She's having a near death experience after near death experience, and she doesn't want to leave the realm, but she's brought back to life, and I think maybe she spends the rest of her later years trying to recapture or go back to that experience that she had during this, what I'm assuming is an origin phase for her. But maybe you'll correct me on that. I know you've read more of the issues, but what do you think of this?
So I want to be clear that and I try to be careful showing, because there's a lot of nudity in this issue. This issue is the art style. It gets really out there. Fernando Blanco really outdid himself. It's gorgeous. It really conveys the otherworldly nature of the Undernet, the World Tree, very, very well. But don't, if you pick up this issue, you flip through it at your local comic shop. Hey, I heard the guys talking about this. Is this something I'd be interested in? Don't assume that this sort of weird psychedelic art style and very little narration and very little dialogue, very few word balloons in this issue is indicative of the series. The rest of the series, all the issues so far have been very traditional in terms of, it looks like a comic, reads like a comic, you can understand everything that's going on. But yeah, this issue intentionally showing the kind of the alien nature of the Undernet, and how it, the effects that it has on the mind, and obviously it affects Sammy and what have you. I don't want to get too much more into the plot other than that, because, although we don't necessarily try to go spoiler free on here, I know Rocky has read the first 3 issues, but he's not caught up. I don't want to give away too much, because, once he's read it, then maybe we'll do a little more spoilery. But I know when I got caught up, it was the same thing. I'd read like the first 4 or 5 issues, and then I hadn't read anything, and then I think when issue 10 came out, I was like, man, I really need to get caught up on World Tree. I heard a lot of people talking about it, and so I read the first 10 issues like all in one night. Like I stayed up till like 4 in the morning and just read one after the other after the other.
You die hard.
Because I couldn't stop reading it, and it kept getting better and better, and some of the revelations that come out, you're just like, holy crap! Like oh my god, it's so good. It is so good. So beyond it being a compelling story, and I will give you a little bit, right? So it's this idea that this genius teenager and his very smart group of friends stumbled across the idea or the existence of the Undernet, knew that it was very dangerous, and then went out and recruited some other tech type billionaire guy to kind of finance them. Because they wanted to they wanted to stop it, they wanted to control it and prevent it from destroying the world. And then in later years it gets out, and he has sort of positioned himself to be able to stop it. If it comes back around again, he goes back and recruits his friends to kind of stop it, and that's where we are in present day. So you get 2 narratives, because it flashes back to things that happened in the past when they were dealing with it the first time and locked it away, as well as it having escaped here in the present day. So they're interesting characters. It's great art. It's well paced. It is disturbing at times, and obviously it's for mature readers. The other thing about it, like, set aside the idea of the structure and how it works technically as a comic or whatever, and just think about like the themes of it and why it's so fascinating to me. Because it's interesting in terms of fear of the unknown. James Tynion sort of cut his teeth at DC under Scott Snyder as a superhero, writer of superhero comics. And then when he chose to leave DC to focus on his own work, like, invariably, almost all the stuff he's done is horror. Like, the horror just fascinates the guy, and that's the genre that he plays in the most. And it's to our benefit as readers, because he does such a fascinating job with it, and diversity of story, like Rocky was talking about, within the horror genre. So this idea of fear of the unknown, which isn't necessarily anything new when it comes to horror. That's, in a lot of ways, that's sort of the basis of horror. But also fear of technology, I mean, we all live in a world where, I mean, Rocky and I do this podcast, several times a week. We get together over the internet with our computers, with technology, and we talk about these books. And we wouldn't even know each other because we live thousands and thousands of miles away if it wasn't for technology, right? So technology, it's part of our everyday lives. It brings us closer together. It's made the world smaller. And that's both a good and bad thing in some ways. When Rocky and I were growing up, you couldn't really spoil a comic the way you can spoil it now because there wasn't the internet and all that kind of stuff. And same with movies and television or whatever. So yeah, there's good and bad. But at the end of the day, for the most part, a lot of people don't have any idea how technology works, right? And Nate Bargatze, he's one of the most popular comics in the world right now. He does this bit where he talks about going back in time. He's like, if I went back in time, if I was a time traveler, I couldn't prove I was like from the future. I don't think I could prove I was from the future. I'd be telling people, yeah, you just invented the telephone. Well, someday you're going to be able to have a phone in your pocket. And they'll ask me, well, how does that work? And I'll be like, satellites. And they're like, well, what's a satellite? And I shouldn't have brought that up. I don't know how to explain what a satellite is. I don't know how to explain how a cell phone works. I couldn't prove it. And that's most people, you just know that it works. You just know it's technology. But the whole idea of artificial intelligence, thinking computers, and we've done this to ourselves with movies like Terminator and what have you, and the idea of technology taking over, because again, so many people, it's unknown. You don't know how it works. You have the conspiracy theorists that say, the Big Brother's listening to you. And I mean, to an extent, they're right. I mean, your Echoes, your Amazon Alexas or what have you that you have in your house, they're listening all the time, right? That's how it knows when you call its name, because it's actively listening. So there is this inherent fear of technology, even though we use it. I mean, I work in technology for my day job, so I have a better understanding of it than most people. But there's an understanding of how it works, and then there's being able to explain it to a layperson, and those are two very different things. And I don't have anywhere near the understanding that other experts have or whatever. But I find that to be fascinating, and the idea that technology could lead to our demise, technology could lead us to discovery of other types of life, which is a little bit what the world tree is, the undernet. And could it be a gateway? It used to be you'd tell a story like this and it would be like, oh, they found a gateway to hell. Now it's, oh, they found a gateway on the internet to a bad internet sort of thing, which a lot of people think, you'll hear about the dark web and all that stuff. So it's tapping into sort of inherent modern fears that a lot of people have as well, like almost fear for an older generation, the internet generation, people that grew up with the internet and the computer in their pocket or what have you. So I find that to be fascinating. And then when you bring in I said set aside the technical part, let's bring the technical part back in terms of, story structure, art, visual pacing, dialogue, scripting, all that. It's top notch. It could not possibly be better. It's so good. Like we talked multiple times this episode about Jordan Blair and her talent as a color artist. This issue is a perfect example of what she can do. So again, I don't want to disparage her when I say I don't like the colors on G.I. Joe. I'm not saying that Jordy's doing anything wrong. She's probably doing what she was told to do. But she knows how to bring mood and pacing in terms of visuals to the color palette, and pace that out and bring motion and story beats and all that. She knows how to do it perfectly, maybe better than anybody that's working right now. Her and Rob Lee, maybe, when in terms of color. Not Rob Lee, Brad Anderson over at Ghost Machine. But anyway, this is a fantastic series. It might be this, or like this and Power Fantasy are probably my two favorite series, indie series that are coming out right now. Probably my two favorite series overall. I don't even have to quantify it or qualify it by saying indie. They are just fantastic, and yeah, I definitely encourage people to pick this up and check it out. Again, I think the first two trades are out, and then obviously you can pick up issue 13 this week and check it out if you're so inclined. So, all right, one more book to talk about, and I don't think you're caught up on this one either, Rocky, and I won't shame you if you're not. But it's another really, really great series from our good friend Jeremy Adams.
Jeremy Adams, yeah.
Flash Gordon, issue number 6 is out this week. Uh, as I said, written by Jeremy Adams. We have two artists in this issue. Will Conrad handles the first half of the issue, and then Cliff Richard. Well, he 1 through 17, and then Cliff Richards fills in a few pages at the end, 18 through 22. Colors by Lee Lowridge and letters by Taylor Esposito. I'm not going to say a whole lot about what's been going on in terms of specific story beats and plot points in this issue, but just overall, if you haven't been reading Flash, what's going on? In the prelude issue that we got from Mad Cave, the planet Mogo that Ming the Merciless ruled with an iron fist was blown up. So Flash had brought a weapon to Mogo to defeat Ming's army. Ming captured Flash and the weapon and tried to use the weapon to destroy Earth. Didn't know how the weapon worked right. The weapon overloaded. It destroyed Mogo. The citizens and inhabitants of Mogo, like some of them escaped. Millions escaped, but many more millions died. And everybody is calling Flash Gordon the planet killer. Killer of Mogo, whatever he did. They're blaming it on Flash rather than Ming. So when the first issue starts out and Flash is a prisoner, we're not exactly sure of who, but he's on a prison planet. He escapes. He finds out Ming is on that planet as well. And reluctantly, he rescues Ming because the one spaceship on the planet is coded to Ming's DNA. Because Ming manipulated the warden of the prison planet. And so Ming basically forces Flash Gordon to take him along with him. And now Ming is plotting to regain his throne and find a new homeworld. And Flash is just trying to get back to Dale Arden, his long-lost love, and find out where she is and clear his name and that sort of thing. So it's high adventure. It's more. I haven't read a ton of Flash Gordon, like a lot of people I think of my generation. Like my most exposure to Flash Gordon is the Sam Jones Flash movie with the Queen soundtrack. Flash, savior of the universe.
Classic movie.
Yeah, it's so good. So that's like the Flash that I know. So I haven't read like the old school comic strips or anything, but I love what Jeremy Adams is doing here because we got an issue that had Ming's origin, and we've talked to Jeremy about this before about how so much of Flash, because of when Flash was written, it was kind of the golden age, early silver age when stories weren't as sophisticated. So there's so much of the mythos, whether it be Flash's background and history as a kid on Earth or Ming's origin or whatever, that just never has been explored because they just didn't do that in the storytelling back there. So when you take the gorgeous Will Conrad art, you add in the kind of classic adventure feel of Flash Gordon, and then you add in some more sophisticated storytelling from a great storyteller, somebody who's really good at weaving different elements together, as we know Jeremy Adams is, with his DC work where he brings in events and things that you'd forgotten about or whatever. You'd get all that in a gorgeous comic. Yeah, sign me up, man. I'm there. So when Flash first hit, I heard people talking about it. People were really enjoying it. I haven't heard a lot lately. And with issue 6 dropping this week, I definitely wanted to talk about it because it's fantastic. The Will Conrad art is awesome. And the last thing I'll mention is that, classic Flash Gordon serials, like they used to put them in the movie theaters and they'd be like a little 10 or 15 minute or whatever. And we ended on a cliffhanger and you had to come back the next Saturday for the matinee to, get the next part to see what happened. Jeremy does a good job of capturing the cliffhanger feel. Like so many of these issues end on cliffhangers. You're like, oh man, I need a couple more pages. I want to know what's going to happen. But you got to come back for the next issue to see what goes down. Anyway, give us your thoughts, Rocky. Are you caught up? Have you been reading Flash Gordon?
I have. I haven't read this issue. I love Will Conrad's art. I wish I would see more of it around. I haven't read this issue, but I'm excited. I'll catch up on it, I'm sure, this weekend. And I don't have anything really to add. Jeremy Adams, we sing his praises with Green Lantern and Aquaman, and Flash Gordon just doesn't get enough attention. Although I should say it has gotten attention. by others on the internet. I'm happy to say there are certainly a number of reviewers on the internet that are. Jeremy Adams is making a mark for himself in Flash Gordon because more and more people are talking about Flash. If it isn't Flash at DC Comics that he was wrongfully removed from, at least he's got Flash Gordon. And it's good. He's putting the Flash Gordon is back on the map in large part thanks to Jeremy Adams. And yeah, he's doing a really good job. No question about it. And yeah. No, I don't got much to say. Way to go, Jeremy, and keep it up. And Will Conrad's doing a great job on the art.
Yeah, 100%. And they do have Flash Gordon quarterly as well. It's not the same storyline as this. And then obviously they had the Defenders of the Earth series that Dan Didio did, which tied in with the cartoon of which Flash Gordon was a member. But obviously that's a different storyline as well. So anyway, like I said, those are the books we're going to talk about in detail for this week. There are a few other series that I'll mention that are out this week if you're in your local comic shop. Independent-wise, King Spawn is up to issue number 42. The final issue of House of Slaughter, issue number 30 from the aforementioned James Tynion. Now, Something is Killing His Children is going to continue, but this tie-in, House of Slaughter, has its final issue. I've not read any of that stuff, even though I have the first few issues of Something is Killing the Children. I just never got into it. But don't worry, the world of Something is Killing Children is continuing. It's just the House of Slaughter that's ending. Also, Walking Dead Deluxe, which is basically just The Walking Dead but colorized, is up to issue 107. Conan the Barbarian over at Titan is up to issue number 18. We also have a new series called Let This One Be a Devil coming out from Dark Horse. That's also written by James Tynion along with Steve Fox. Doll Parts, A Lovesick Tale, which Rocky's talked about in the past on our Independent Spotlight, is up to issue 3 this week. And then another book that we've talked about in the past, Free Agents, from writers Kurt Busiek and Fabian Nicieza, is up to issue number 7 this week. So those are some of the other... Oh, go ahead.
I just want to give a quick shout out to Free Agents number 7. Has a hell of a cliffhanger this week. We never talked about it, but it's a hell of a cliffhanger in Free Agents number 7 for those who are paying attention. It was quite good. Sorry.
Yeah, I need to get caught up on that. I don't think I've read past issue 4. So that's another one that I probably read it all in one sitting, and I'll probably really enjoy it. So anyway, those are some of the other books that you might want to be on the lookout for at your local comic shop this week. I guess it's time for Book of the Week, Rocky. I mean, there's an obvious choice, but I haven't even really thought about it. I think Gunslinger Spawn, or Deadly Tales of the Gunslinger is certainly worthy. I mean, World Tree is worthy as well. I'm gonna let you go first.
Well, then it's Brood is really good too. It's really good. Deadly Tales of Spawn is really good. Jeez, is World Tree. I was really impressed with World Tree. Power Fantasy was fantastic. Oh my God, this is tough. Okay, in terms of what visually what blew me away, and then the story just really pulled like what I'm imagining. My desire to hear the story, World Tree, visually just boom, hit me hard. But in terms of the overall package, I still gotta. You know what? I'm gonna just. Brood number 3 beats out Power Fantasy number 6 by a nose hair. But Brood number 3 I'd go, because the character work, the family dysfunction, the way it all seems to blend in, and it has something to say about family, about friendship, about just you can't choose your family, and that's probably a good thing. And despite all the dysfunction, I always say I'm a family law lawyer by occupation, and if it's one thing I know is that I don't know what dysfunctional is. All I know is that everyone functions in their own degree of dysfunction, and in a superhero context, nothing embodies that better than Brood.
All right, good pick. I thought for sure you were going to go with World Tree or Power Fantasy, and then I was going to go with the one you didn't pick, You threw me a curveball picking Brood, but not a bad pick at all. Certainly worthy. And here's the one other thing that I'll mention about Brood, which I haven't mentioned before. You know, I talked about having Jordan Bloom and Heath Corson on to talk about minor threats, the world of minor threats, and Brood specifically, and had a fantastic chat with them. It was so much fun. Before I had that conversation with them, Heath sent me the first 3 issues, and I got to read, before issue 1 even came out, I got to read all 3 issues, first 3 issues of Brood. So now we're to the point where the next issue that comes out is going to be new to me as well. Even though I've read all the issues, you know, I read them all before I talked to Heath, and then each week when they've dropped, I've read them again so we could talk about them here. But yeah, when the 4th issue comes out, I'm highly anticipated because it's going to be new. I'm going to get to see where the story goes, like all of you are. So man, I am like anticipating issue 4 of that series tremendously, having read each of the first 3 issues multiple times. So yeah, like I said, I was going to pick whatever you didn't pick of World Tree and Power Fantasy, but you didn't give me that option. But you know, by that same nose hair you were talking about, I'm going to go with Power Fantasy over World Tree. And the reason for this is, you know, if in any way what I pick for Book of the Week influences somebody to pick up a book, I think it's easier to pick up Power Fantasy 6 and kind of understand what's going on than it is to pick up World Tree 13 if you haven't read any previous World Tree. Like this is a interesting, you know, visually and intriguing what's going on, but I don't really know what's going on, as opposed to I've read all of World Tree, I know what's going on, and it has a greater impact. So yeah, I'm gonna, for that reason, and you know, maybe I'm just justifying my choice here, but I'm gonna go with Power Fantasy number 6. But you can't go wrong with any of those. Gunslinger Spawn is another one that I really considered. Deadly Tales of the Gunslinger. We keep calling it Gunslinger Spawn. There is a Gunslinger Spawn series, but that is set in the present day. But yeah, Deadly Tales of Gunslinger from Jimmy Palmiotti and Patrick Reynolds has definitely got some consideration for Book of the Week as well. But yeah, I'm going with Power Fantasy. Rocky's going with Brood. Honorable mention to World Tree and Deadly Tales of the Gunslinger as well. So hey, thanks for joining us, everybody. We appreciate it. Regardless of what you're picking up, we hope you get out to your local comic shop this week and support your local retailer. Times are tight, and the shelves are crowded. It's hard to know what to order. And kind of on that note, I want to remind everybody, I do it all the time. I bang this drum in my interviews when I have somebody on, a creator on, and we're talking about an upcoming book. I'm always like, pre-order. I want to mention it here. Like, pre-order is the lifeblood of comic shops. It's so hard to know what to order, especially with the way distribution is kind of fractured right now, and there are so many choices. So not only are you doing yourself a favor by making sure you don't miss out on any particular issue or series, you're doing your retailer a favor by letting them know what to order. And if they get a lot of people asking for a particular series like Power Fantasy, then they know, hey, maybe not only do I need to order enough to cover all the people that have pre-ordered, I'm going to order a few copies for the shelf, which I might not normally do for an independent book that doesn't, you know, have, you know, crazy visuals or, you know, 1,000 variant covers or whatever. So again, pre-order. If they do, you know, pull box or use Comic Hub or some sort of ordering software like that, I encourage you to do that as well. It really helps out the retailer. So don't forget, if you want our opinion on the DC books this week, head over to Rocky's YouTube channel, Comic Space Boom ! Like, comment, subscribe. Make sure to ring that notification bell. And I'll remind everybody also, again, as always, all of our content is available on the podcast audio feed. If you want to listen while you're exercising or riding the subway or whatever, just go to wherever you get your podcast and do a search for the Comic Source and subscribe. Don't forget, as long as you're joining us here on the Comic Source YouTube channel, like, comment, subscribe there as well, where you get to check out all our interviews and content and convention coverage and what have you. So that's going to do it for this episode. Any last thoughts, Rocky?
No, just I like your sentiment. Support your local comic shop.
Yep, 100%. Free Comic Book Day coming up soon. It'll be a great time to get out there and discover your local comic shop if you don't have one. So, like I said, that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Appreciate you joining us as always. We'll talk to you next time.
Catch you later.